So one of the things that we wanted to talk about while I'm here with both of my brothers, we all work in kind of different areas and we've chosen to do different things with our lives, but one of the things that's pretty consistent across the board with myself and all my brothers is success. Most of the things that we've chosen to do, we've done well, and so I wanted to take this chance to sit down with my two brothers and talk a little bit about why that is and what these guys have that sort of makes them approach a situation a different way from most people. As a lot of you guys know, I went from doing construction work and, bouncing in a bar and all this kind of stuff in order to make most of my money as a musician. And then I transitioned from that into doing the Operation Werewolf thing, doing personal training, coaching, nutrition coaching, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I do full time now. And in the last year, I've gone from, just a really small startup thing to something that's really developed into a way that I can live the lifestyle that I want to live, travel as much as I want to travel, and still be able to pay all the bills. So my brother Seth has his own company as well, and he also works in media, which he's been doing for a good long while. My brother Matthias does specialized carpentry, woodwork, and is an artist as well. So I wanted to talk to you guys, what is it about the way that you go about things? How is it that you go about, first setting goals in order to sort of break what it is that you want to do down into the steps in order to get there, or is that something that you even do?
I do it in training more than I do it on the business side of things. In my business, I definitely have long-term goals more than anything, and just deal with those, getting to those in kind of micro goals along the way. But training's more, you can measure it easier. But one of the things, I had a mentor early on in my career who kind of taught me, one of the things she taught me was to kind of look at where you want to be, whatever that goal is, whether it's a training goal or a business goal, but start there and work backwards to where you are. And you kind of, if when you're starting here, you can look at the next little goals all the way, but it's easy to lose track in there and get lost. And if you work backwards from that goal, what's one step away from that goal? And if you work backwards all the way to where you are, you've laid out the roadmap.
So what might that look like in training?
Well, in training, if it's, I don't know, for me, I'm always just trying to lift heavier weight, but if a goal
seems to be not working.
Yeah, not compared to some of these guys. But yeah, if it's a 1 rep max squat, and I have a number in my head where I want to get to, well, what's one step away from that would be 11 and a half weeks into a 12-week cycle.
Sure.
It's a little easier with strength because you've got training cycles that you work all the way through. It's kind of, the map's already kind of there for you.
Sure.
But with technique work, something I've struggled with for a long time, double unders, jump and rope, muscle ups. There, it's a little more, you kind of have to map it out. There's some programs there to help you, but you kind of really have to go, okay, if I want 10 unbroken muscle ups, what's one step away from that? That's 9. And you work back that number and you start seeing where you are and you start working at it one at a time.
Sure.
And that's what I had to finally do, is just say, stop worrying about 10 right now. That's not where
So in other words, breaking things down into manageable bites instead of breaking off way more than you can chew and getting discouraged. And like a lot of people you see, they want this or they want that, and that's one of the things I always tell my buddies. They'll come in and they haven't trained for 4 weeks and they've been partying or whatever.
Yeah,
they
but
come
the
in,
universe knows.
Right, they feel like they should be able to bench 225, but they can't, and you're kind of like, well, where are your goals?
They're owed that.
Yeah. What about you? How do you work?
I think the biggest thing that kind of plays into both sides of that, whether it's your personal life and your personal goals or training, is just like with the diet that you guys spoke about earlier. It has to be flexible. People get these rigid goals and they say, I want to put on 25 pounds on my body or on my lift, right? And then that doesn't account for derailment. You get an injury, you do, different things happen. Maybe that partying, was, you had a buddy's wedding you were going to and you cut loose, and so you're 3 days out of training and you have to be
6-day crack binge. Right.
You have to be flexible in a point where you can say, okay, I will sacrifice this, maybe I'll party a little bit, but I'm not going to expect that. And that I have no problem putting 3 days onto the end of when I want to get my goal.
Sure.
Because I have the rest of my life to achieve that goal.
Right.
So in your personal life, you have to understand that, especially in the beginning, you have to be flexible because you're hustling.
Sure.
You know, at the point where you guys are at, it becomes less of a hustle and a little bit more of a cycle, you know, of a plan that's already in place. Whereas at the point where I'm at right now, I have to wake up every morning and say, this is how much money I'm going to make today. And that could mean anything. Luckily I have a skill set that broadens that range, and that skill set makes me flexible. So I may be shoveling dirt one day, right? I may be shoveling dirt one day to make that money because the other things that I wanted to do didn't fit into that day.
Sure.
So I'm going to be flexible, and I'm going to do whatever I can with what I can to achieve that goal today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what he's talking about there too comes into, you know, the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is consistency. You know, you're talking about the idea that, you know, if you put 3 days onto the end of something, sure, that's great, as long as you keep staying the course toward it. You know, and I remember having a conversation with both of you guys one time, and we were talking about how, you know, I think we said, can you imagine how strong you'd be, you know, and where you'd be with your goals if, when you had first started lifting weights, if you had just put half a pound a week or a month on, you know, how strong you'd be, and you'd be world class as an athlete or you know, a businessman or an artist or whatever it is. Because, you know, I think one of the things about us, especially when we were young, is that I remember Dad said that the Waggener boys have brilliant minds and aimless hearts. I'm not sure about the first part, but I'm fucking positive about the second. And so, you know, a lot of what we've done was get really into a lot of different things, and I think it took a lot of us a while to figure out how to hone that down. So let's talk a little bit about consistency. You know, I know you've dealt with some injuries, we've all dealt with some injuries. You know, how do you stay on course, whether it's through injuries or just kind of life derailing you, new jobs? You know, what's your technique for staying
Well,
on?
I mean, respectfully, not really, but I disagree with just that whole idea of tacking time on the end. You say, you know, we have our whole lives. I don't know, man. Yeah,
I ride fast and take chances. I don't know about you. I live a little sort of a tame.
Yeah,
lifestyle.
obviously the tamest of the four of us.
Sure.
But you know, I love to roll the dice as much as the next guy, and I've done that. Like I've done that especially in my professional life. I've taken some big chances in my professional life, and they all paid off for the most part. But when it comes to the idea of training and consistency, you know, I don't know how willing I am to, you know, tack 3 days on that you don't know if you're going to have onto accomplishing a goal if it's really important to you. You know, I used to party a lot. You guys still, but I mean, I really don't anymore, and I've cut back. I mean, I barely drink anymore. Once I started logging my food, I'm like, God, I'd much rather have some rice than this beer.
Sure.
But, you know, when it comes to consistency, to me, you know, yeah, we all are going to slip up. And so on that point, I do agree. You have to be a little flexible in managing your own expectations.
Sure.
But for me, at least, consistency, a couple little derailments like that, 3 days can become 12 really quick for me.
You know, and you and I have talked a lot about that on the phone too, where people are always saying, you know, oh yeah, well that's a good goal, but be realistic, and we're always kind of like, get fuck realistic.
Let's get weird.
Right. Use
I think you're, the other day on the video you spoke about like your attack towards something, and one of the things that really stuck with me was when you were talking about sacrifice. All right, okay, like you have to understand, if you're trying to get 40 pounds heavier and you're trying to reach these goals, like if that's a goal, you do have to understand that drinking tomorrow you're sacrificing. Right. Time with your children is actually sacrificing that in the way of your goals. So I think it's very important to understand that idea is that, you know, 3 days may not be that big of a deal, of one night of partying may not be that big of a deal if you're attacking it like a champion every other fucking day.
Yeah,
and you can't be flexible in that idea.
And if you're being honest with yourself,
it's a sacrifice.
If you're being honest with yourself and you're saying, I have attacked it like a champion for 90 days in a row, right, so I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that I had a six-pack last night, more power to you. And I just don't know many people that can.
Sure, and what is attacking like a champion? You know, I was talking with this guy at my gym, one of the trainers there, and he's, a really focused, really dedicated trainer. He's really fucking strong. He's obviously one of the most serious guys in the gym, and we were sitting there talking about it, and he was asking me, how can I monetize this thing? How can I get better? Because I said, man, I'm always watching. You're so fucking serious with your training. He's like, I wish I could get other people to see that. And he said, one of the things is it's hard for me to see myself as being, an authority on this. And I said, right, but who are you comparing yourself to? And he said, guys like Chris Duffin and Mark Bell and all this. And I said, see, that's why you're going to be elite, is because you're not comparing yourself to that dude over there who's deadlifting 450. You're comparing yourself to the best in the world. And you're saying, if I'm not hitting it as hard as they are, then I'm failing. And that's why great guys are great. Reading, that Arnold Schwarzenegger book, Education of a Bodybuilder, he talks about when he was 15, he realized that he wanted to be world class, and that when people picked up a barbell, he wanted them to think Arnold. At 15, what an amazing thing.
Well, and I think that's one of the, just to that guy's point, for me, one of the best things in training for me to maintain that consistency and the focus and drive, I went and did a competition this past weekend, and I had a partner who's way better than me. This guy's the best CrossFitter in the state of Wyoming. Shout out to Malachi Bennett. He's amazing. But my goal wasn't just to go out there and to be like, oh, well, I got him to carry me. My goal is to go out there and limit the amount of times I had to say he had to pick up my slack on that workout. So I think surrounding yourself with people who are so much better than you, or if you don't have that, comparing yourself up against the best, is a great way to maintain that kind of focus.
Yeah, that's going to keep you consistent, but I think at the same time when you're discussing how are we going to inspire people to be consistent, what do you have to say? It's just like a diet, different people respond to different things. Some people, you hit them with a fucking cane every time, they reach for a donut, they respond to that. You yell, you scream at them, you break them down, they respond to that, Some people respond to encouragement, so they need this constant, encouragement, and that can be terrible, all of these things can be terrible. But so when you're looking at a goal, I think you need to be realistic in the sense that is your goal a short-term goal or is it a lifetime goal? A lot of people come to weightlifting and they look at themselves in the mirror. Like if I was to look at myself right now, I'd be completely satisfied if I had 25 more pounds of lean muscle, right? Okay, well, I need to break that down and say...
Until you gain that weight, you're like, fuck, I look tiny.
Right, exactly.
So small.
So I could...
looking at me.
I could say 25 pounds, or I could say 25 pounds of lean muscle, and I could say, okay, well, I could gain 25 pounds. I could eat everything, I could train hard, and I'm gonna get big, I'm gonna put a lot of size on, I'm gonna put some fat on. But if my goal is 25 pounds, I know I can probably achieve that, no problem, consistently in 2 years, lean muscle. Now, that's your goal, you met it in 2 years, then you spend the rest of your life maintaining that.
Sure.
Sitting there with a cat.
Right.
Obsessing
So
about
if truly your goal is only 25 pounds, because you don't want to get too big, because weightlifting does that.
Girls don't like that.
Right. If your goal is 25 pounds, well then spread that out over 10 years. You'll always have a goal, the same goal. You'll always be reaching it, and you'll have it. You'll be looking at your 1 pound per month for a couple of years.
Or just get say 25 pounds, but have a ridiculous lifetime goal.
Sure. Right, exactly. So you have to be flexible with your short-term and long-term goals, but they have to meet each other and they have to agree.
Sure. And I think a lot of what that plays into is the mindset. And I think that's sort of where I want to go with the conversation next, is that in order to even, set goals and have consistency and attain things, ideas, goals in life, we have to have a couple of things set up, and we have to have purpose, and we have to have a mindset, So let's talk a little bit about that, about the idea of finding purpose or of what mindset that it takes to discover not only what it is that you want to do, but then to stick with that, or to be able to, be daring and go out for the next big thing and to kind of keep life adventurous. What's your take on it?
I just, the one day at a time, it's a bit of a cliche or whatever, but I just don't get too bogged down in what's gonna happen, or what could happen. When I moved out here, I had one interview with this, what would be a great job, would have paid a lot of money. I had one interview, they told me, we're paring it down to 3 people, and you know, maybe you'll get a call for a second interview. I moved out here, you know. I rolled the dice. I was stripping logs with this guy for a couple weeks. God, after 3 days, I was just praying that phone would ring, but it did, you know, and I got the job. But if I hadn't, whatever, something else, you know, my mindset is always, even when it comes, yeah, you've got to set goals that are down the road and everything, but you also got to just stop worrying about shit. People, like, if I really sat down and wanted to figure out what's going to burden me, what's just going to sit on my shoulders for the next month, year, 10 years, whatever, I could think of a lot of shit. And it's going to drive me crazy, and it's going to make you not focused on what you should be focused on.
Instead of just saying, I'll burn that bridge when I cross it.
Yeah, that's for me. That's life for me, man. I'll get there, and I'll have to deal with it. Eventually, some of these things will catch up to you, and you have to deal with them. But guess what? It's just as good to deal with it then as now. And you just can't get so... People get broken by this shit, man. People kill themselves over stuff. People kill themselves over less stuff than what I could sit here and lay out on a table for you, shit that I could be worried about. You know, people eat a bullet rather than sit there and deal with that. That's not the way I want to live my life.
Good.
You know, yeah, I mean, good for us, but
I remember reading a Johnny Payne. Shout out to Johnny Payne while we're shouting out. But I remember reading a Johnny Payne article a while ago before I got to go up there and hang out with him, and just realized what a supreme degenerate he was. But you know, he wrote this article called "Burning the Ships," and it was so good, you know, because he talked about, he's like, I'm fucking tattooed all over my face, and I made $500,000 last year, you know, like, and he's saying, you know, people ask, you know, they say, are you going to regret this? Are you going to regret that? And he's like, look, I made all those decisions so that I didn't have a backup plan, because I didn't want a backup plan. I wanted to be able to say, hey, look, this is what I'm going to do with my life, and now I can't go back, you know. And after meeting the guy and talking to him, you realize that there's a dude who, he may have a plan, like we're talking about, he may have some goals, but he wings it, and he relies a lot on knowing that he's going in the right direction because he's being true to the direction he said he was going to go in. And I have a huge amount of respect for that. What do you think?
No, I think that finding purpose is something that's really hard in our day and age, just because of who's telling us what this purpose should be.
Sure.
You know, and what the status quo purpose is in life. You know, they tell you, okay, you're in a fucking $160,000 house. Yeah, you're in a $200,000 house. You got some guy mowing your lawn. You got a car. You know, and you got a wife that you don't want to have sex. You know, except for after you pay for the bail, you know, trip or whatever.
She'll need to drive 5 hours.
Yeah, so with a head turned the other way.
Yeah, you know, so I think that generally people, when you look at people in this world, when you say, what are your goals? Usually the first thing they're going to think of is a number, and it's how much money they want to make a year,
sure.
and what that, but then you're like, well, what does that mean to you?
What are you going to
do?
And
it really means that if they have that much money, then they can come home and kick up their feet and watch their TV show stress-free.
Sure, that's all they want.
That's all they want out of life,
right?
And that's what's going to calm them down. But then, of course, we all know these people. Then they get fat. They get, you know, their lives absolutely lose purpose because there is no purpose there. And then they get depressed, and then they wind up coming to people like us and saying, hey, how can I change my life?
Sure.
You know, how can I get off this?
Well, you get that all the time from people. These exact people he's talking about are the ones that come to guys like us and say,
right.
God, I wish.
Yeah, sure.
Every sentence
Sure.
in these people's lives is starts.
Yeah, so I think establishing that purpose, the reason I can look at, you know, 33 years old and say, I know my purpose, is because of my kind of aimless heart. I went everywhere. I did everything. You know, I tried everything. And I thought, all the drugs. Yeah, that's what I said, everything. But so I think it's when you live a life like that, of adventure when you're young, I can look back and say, no, this is not my purpose.
Right.
No, this
process
is not
of
my
elimination.
Purpose. Right, and we see this, you know, colleges these days. Nobody works in their major, you know, because they were too young and they got one major,
right.
And they looked at one thing. So I think, you know, if you live with an adventurous spirit, you can start eliminating things. So you can say, okay, I'm going to start a clothing brand. This may give me purpose, and this may be what I want. But if it's not what I want, I'm going to at least eliminate that and continue towards something that makes me happy.
Sure.
So everybody has that idea, but generally speaking, if you ask somebody, what would make you happy? What would your ideal job be? Chances are, if you gave them that job, they would quit it.
Right, and I mean, we've talked about this, we all have, they always say, what are you doing when you're at work and you're supposed to be working? What are you actually doing? That's what you should be doing for a living, and I think about that. Yeah, for most of them, like, I should be a professional Facebook troll.
Arguing about politics.
Right, but I realized what I was always doing, I remember the last sheetrocking job I did, and when I did this huge piece of art, on sheetrock, and, it was like downtime or whatever at lunch, and then probably like over that, and, I realized what I wanted to do, not necessarily what I was the best at, but what I wanted to do was something that involved writing, drawing, training, being creative, and so that's a hard thing to fucking hammer down, to be like, what can I do for a living that involves all these things? And so I think that I've married that all together pretty well, because now what I do with my day is I wake up, and while I'm drinking coffee, I'm working on art designs, then I'm writing articles, then I'm doing videos, then I'm going to the gym and training, it's not like I'm world class at any of those things, but I think, what you're talking about with this idea of flexibility is saying you don't have to be world class at any one thing if that's not necessarily what's making you happy, but what you are doing is saying that my stress-free life and my enjoyment is not based around a financial number, and if I do have a certain amount of money, and for example, it's no fucking joke, and there's no secret that what we're trying to do here is make enough money, but when you ask me for what, it's to travel, to see my friends, to be able to go out and inspire myself. Sure, exactly. And so that's kind of the final thing I wanted to talk about with you guys a little bit, is that I know in my circles, and for me, 6 years ago, if we would have sat down here, we would have started to have a conversation about money, I know what I would have said. 6 years ago, I was living in a cabin in the woods with no power and no running water. I had hair down past my fucking waist, and I would have been like, fuck you. I took a lot of pride in the fact that I felt like I didn't need a lot of money in order to get by. And although that was great, there were a couple of things that stood out to me when I was broke. One was I didn't have a lot of stress as long as nothing was happening. If I needed, God forbid, like I got into an accident, I couldn't pay my medical bills. I needed to go see somebody. Right. The ER, that it just goes away. Or if I wanted to go see somebody, travel was a big deal to me. If I was like, God, I got to spend $400 to go see my brothers out west, that was a big deal. It set me back for a long time because all I was doing was bouncing. And you don't make a lot of money as a bouncer. So one of the things that I've really been trying to change the mind of people with, especially a lot of the guys I know, they retain this mindset of like, this money is the root of all evil thing. And it's like, I've really started to try to convince these guys, look, what money is the root of is whatever you're going to do with it. But money can be the root of freedom, because we know that in this world that we live in this society that we live in this day and age, the only thing that really is able to make you be free enough is to have enough money that you can say, I don't fucking care. This is not a problem. Because then I can worry about what really matters. And so when we talk about making money, it's not that you get obsessed with money. It's that you get good enough at making it so that you don't have to obsess over it. So let me ask you a couple of questions about that. What do you think, how do you feel that your mindset toward that has changed, and how do you feel one can sort of get good at that or understand it a little bit better in order to free up that whole space of his mind to not have to worry about it so much?
Well, we kind of talked about it when we were talking about mindset. You can get bogged down in the whole, and I wrote a piece that I took a lot of flack for, talking about, saving money is for idiots, and people kind of miss the point.
That Aspen trip, how
else are you going to pay for sex with your wife in Aspen? But people kind of missed the point that I was making. What I was saying is, you gotta, if you live a little bit more for now. We get really wrapped up. People get really wrapped up once that 401k match. My retirement, I was like, man, you might not live to be 70. I'm not saying be reckless and don't plan at all for the future, but god damn, man, some of these people, they save so much money for their retirement, they never enjoy anything now. And then what happens when they're 67 and they get diagnosed with pancreatic cancer?
Sure.
Or great, you left your kids some money. Is that helping you?
Sure. Or they're just wrecked and they can't even do the things that.
And so give a little bit of advice. I want to hear a little advice from you and a little advice from you on, because I think people do look at the way that we're doing things and living our lives, and they're like, man, it looks like these guys are freed up a lot. I know I travel a lot and all this kind of stuff. What were the steps that you took to get a little bit more in that direction? For say a guy who's watching this right now, who's, say he's washing dishes or whatever, and he's going to school and he's training or whatever. What's your advice to that guy? How does he get a little bit more freedom?
We live in a day and age now where everything is available to you. You don't have to go pay $40,000 and pay
drop out
for
of high
something.
school.
I don't have a high school diploma.
No,
I just came off running the communications for the
I have a high school
government.
diploma.
Yeah, state operated high school diploma. The thing is, there's so much access to knowledge today that, if you want to learn how to Photoshop and be a graphic designer, go online and learn how to Photoshop and be a graphic designer. There's all of this stuff, all this technology. College hasn't even caught up to half of it anyway, and by the time they do, it's going to be on to the next. So you can learn to
Pick your hustle and
pick
learn
your
it.
hustle and go learn it. And I'd never built a website before. I'm not saying my website's something special, but it gets the job done.
Shit's for nerds, right?
Right. And so I taught myself. That was a long weekend, a couple really long days, watching a lot of YouTube videos and trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. But guess what? I just landed a job.
Sure.
When government budget cuts came down and I had to get a job, guess what? I just landed a job doing?
So
building websites.
Pick something to do and then learn it and then market it.
Go take advantage of the knowledge that's out there and go market it and find an audience for it.
Sure.
But you have to create.
What about you?
I think the one thing is that you have to prepare for it. You have to understand that, okay, the life that I want to live is in the future, and what can I do now to prepare myself for that? So I would not advise you to quit your fucking job today, because you're not going to figure out how to monetize it in a week, and your bills are due in a month.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is prepare yourself and say, okay, I may have to take a little bit of a pay cut to do this. So I'm gonna cut my fucking cable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use the internet on my phone. I'm not gonna pay for Wi-Fi.
Sure.
I'm gonna cut costs so that, okay, in this life that I'm living right now, in this apartment with this TV and this cable package and this phone package, I have to make $1,200 a month. And in order to pay those bills,
Sure.
so
Reduce
that
those
means,
expenses.
right? So that means I have to have a job where I'm pulling in at least $2,000 a month to cover food and everything like that. So then you cut those expenses. You can always cut those expenses by almost half. So you say, okay, I'm gonna lower that to $700, $800 worth of bills, and that means I can take that pay cut and not take a hit.
Okay.
And then you have to be committed to it. Most people want free time, so they get to that free time and then they abuse it.
Yeah.
And you have to still work. You're still going to be putting in hours a day in order to achieve your goal, just like any other goal, whether it be in the gym or your personal life. Yet you need to be the boss that is still productive. And when you're your own boss, you have to make sure that you're making yourself be productive and that you're not abusing that free time, but that you're creating that free time.
Get a job where you can get, if you're not ready to quit your job, if you don't want to be as reckless as him, get a job doing something where you're learning how to do something that you can do in your hustle.
And I think that's a good spot to wrap it up, since my phone's probably not even recording us right now anyway. So thank you guys. Appreciate you taking the time.